This is AndyTube. In this video I'm going to show you how to thread the needle, wind the bobbin, and some basic sewing, and I do mean basic, on this Singer Model 301A. So the 301 and 301A are the same machine, and I know that hundreds of my subscribers are very familiar with this model, but there's always new people tuning into my channel, and I get questions on a pretty regular basis where someone has inherited a machine or been given a machine or found it at Goodwill or a garage sale or a church bazaar, and the machine is new to them. And that includes the Model 301. So this video is for those people who maybe it's the first time they've got their hands on a 301, and this will show you how to do some basic setup of it. So the Singer 301 takes a category 2020 Singer needle, which is modern day is still called that, but it's also called a 15x1 or 15 by 1 needle, and it comes in different sizes. The sewing demonstrations today is going to be on some medium weight muslin, and the instruction manual for the machine says that a number 14 needle would work well for that, with some number 50 thread. So that's how I'm going to set it up. But to install the needle on this, you want to rotate the hand wheel towards you until the needle holder or needle clamp is at the highest position. And on the needle there's one side up here that is flat, and that flat side goes to the left when you insert the needle. So we're going to back off the clamp here to make room for the needle, and with the flat side facing left, I'm going to attempt to insert the needle up in there. Now it's not, it usually can only go in one way. I think they call it a self-correcting needle. And you want to be sure that you put the needle up as far as it will go, because that affects all the stitching and timing. If it doesn't seem that most of that top part goes all the way up there, you may have dirt or debris up inside the clamp that you need to clean out. So flat side left, needle inserted all the way, and clamp tightened. Okay, then we're going to thread this needle, and all these instructions in this video, by the way, are from the instruction manual. And you got to remember, this manual is from the early 1950s, so maybe sewing methods have changed and so forth, but I'm going to give you what's in the instruction manual. And in the description below this video, I'm going to give you a link to where you can download the manual for free from singerco.com under their support area and manual area. So they say to rotate this hand wheel now. We're here to insert the needle, we have the needle all the way up. Now they're saying to make sure that this thread take up lever is all the way up. So you just do that by turning the hand wheel towards you. Okay. And on the back of this is a thread spool, and this is where the needle thread goes. So we're going to take, I guess I'll use the blue on top today. We're going to take this and we're going to put the spool on the spool pin, and it doesn't matter if the thread comes off this way or if you put the spool on and it comes off the other way. There's no difference. Okay, and we're going to take the thread first to what I'm going to call the upper backside thread guide. It's like a little wire hook up here near the pressure thumb screw. So it's got to go in through there first. That's the first place you take it. And I'll turn this around to the front, and we're going to bring the thread from that upper back guide to the upper front thread guide. This is also a formed piece of wire, and you can see there's a little groove in the arm cover plate up here that the thread will rest into. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pull some slack about a foot or so. Now, this is called the front thread guide, this big old wire loop here, and we're going to go down parallel to that, and we're going to take the thread against this big chrome wedge right there. That's the tension unit thread guide. Okay, and what it's there for is that you can angle the thread against it, and you can slide it right in to the tension unit between the tension disc. That is what that big chrome piece is right there. Now, to open up the tension disc and release tension on them so you can get the thread between it, you need to raise the pressure bar. You need to lift that up, because besides raising the pressure foot, the mechanism releases tension on the tension unit. And by raising the pressure bar, I'm just talking about this big chrome lever back here. Okay, so that has to be up when you're threading the needle this way. Now, they recommend, when I say they, I mean Singer, they recommend that you hold on to the spool of thread to keep the thread taut while you do this next step. And I find it more convenient to put my thumb on the thread and press it to the face. But either way. And then with the thread taut now, I'm going to take it over to the face of that tension unit thread guide, and then slide it from right to left into the space between the two tension discs. I'm going to pull it up against the little check spring and maneuver that thread into the fork area right there. See the little finger that comes up? There's like a scooped out area. So what I've got is the thread pulled between the disc, lifted over the little fork, resting in the scoop out area, and that automatically puts the thread behind the little check spring. So when you come around, you're lifting that check spring up and you're pushing it past the fork and putting the thread to the right of the fork. Okay, now we're going to be sure the thread is behind this front thread guard right here. And I'm going to put the thread through the eye or hole in the thread take-up lever. So I see my check spring bouncing. I've got my thread to the right of the fork, coming up through the thread guide and through here. I'm going to just pull about a foot out again, say down to my work table, and then I'm going to lower the presser bar and presser foot. That puts tension back on the tension unit, so now there's some tension against my thread. I'm going to come down here. This is the nose plate thread guard, this little wire loop, and you pass the thread between the loop and the nose plate. There's a little space it'll pop through, and now we're going to come down. There's 3 more thread guides. One right here is at the bottom of the nose plate. It's a little pigtail of wire. Okay, so I'm going to go behind the pigtail, up over the point of the pigtail, and into the hole that's made by the pigtail. Then the next one is the needle bar bushing thread guide. It's right at the bottom of this big silver needle bar bushing, and it's just a wire hook that you enter from the left to the right. Now there's one more thread guard down here that's the needle clamp thread guard, and it's kind of hidden under the needle clamp, but it's similar to the thread guide we just did. It's just like a hook loop, and you go into it from the left to the right. So the idea here is from the thread take-up lever, we go down 1, 2, 3, 4 thread guides to keep the needle thread lining right up with the needle. Alright, so that's all of the path and all of the little thread guides, and now you have to thread the needle. So you got to put the thread through the eye of the needle, and you do it from the right to the left. So you would come with your thread, stick it in from the right, and pull the end of the thread out on the left. And I'm not going to make you watch this old man do that, but that is how you thread the needle. So I'm going to get set up here, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to get set up to show you how to wind the bobbin on the 301 301A, and I'll be back when I'm ready. Alright, I have my needle threaded now, so all the needle thread is set to go. Now I'm going to wind a bobbin, so I'm going to lift up the extension table here, and as a matter of fact I'll lift up the whole machine so I can show you this a little better. This is the bobbin case, and there's a little latch that pulls from left to right, so I'm going to grasp that latch between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to pull out the bobbin case and the bobbin that's inside it. Okay. And the theory here is that, let me move around the other side of the camera here. The theory is while you have the latch out, the bobbin will stay in. So they say to open that latch to release the catch from the bobbin case base under the extension table, pull it out, and then to release the bobbin you can let the latch go and the bobbin will come out. So this bobbin is unique to the model 301, 301A, and the featherweight 221 and 222. Those are the only two machines that this bobbin will work on. And you can, one of the identifiers is that there's 8 holes around the edge of the bobbin on the original bobbin. This is a newly manufactured bobbin, and there's 9 holes. Near the center spindle hole is a very small 9th hole, and I like that because, and it's on each side, because the idea of that is you put the thread from between the two sides and out one of those little holes to start winding it. You can't use a class 15 bobbin, Singer 15. You can't use a class 66 bobbin on this machine. I don't know of any plastic bobbin of this type, so you're going to be looking at a steel bobbin like this. And to get started, we've got to come over here on the hand wheel end, and we're going to stop the motion of the needle and feed dog by turning this stop motion knob or screw to the left or counterclockwise. So we're going to hold the hand wheel with one hand and turn this chrome knob to the left. And it only goes about 1/8 of a turn, and then it hits a stop on the washer. And what this allows is for the motor to turn the hand wheel, but it will not turn any other mechanisms. So the needle bar won't go up and down, and the feed dogs won't move. And you can test that just by turning the hand wheel towards you and seeing that nothing else is moving. Okay, now here I'm going to deviate a little bit from what the manual says, because they say to put the bobbin on the bobbin winder spindle. So this is the bobbin winder mechanism. You have a spindle here connected to a wheel, and the bobbin winder friction ring, commonly called the tire, over here. And when you lift it all the way up, it fits in this nice little space against the hub of the hand wheel. So when the hand wheel turns, then the bobbin winder turns to wind the bobbin. So in the manual, they say put this on and then put the thread through one of the holes. And I find that hard to do. So I put the thread in the bobbin first, where I can hold it up to closer to my eyes and see what I'm doing. And it goes from the inside out. So once I have that threaded through there, now with the end of the thread hanging out the left a few inches, now I'll put the bobbin on the bobbin winder spindle all the way. Okay, and then I'll push the bobbin winder ring or tire up against the hand wheel. So remember, I'm doing this backwards, okay? Now I've got to get this thread behind this disc right here. And that's the bobbin winder tension disc. And that keeps tension on the thread between the tension disc and the spool, so that you get a nice, smooth, even winding. If you just go right from the spool to the bobbin, here on the bobbin winder, the spool can turn and get ahead of you while it's spinning, and you get a sloppy wind, and that's going to mess up your sewing. So I'm going to tuck the thread behind that disc and pull it up in there. Okay, in this case from the left to the right. Now I'm going to put the thread spool onto the spool pin, and I'm just going to back wind it here to pick up some slack. Okay, so when you download your manual or look in the manual that you already have, you'll see they say put the thread here, put the thread spool here, put the thread behind the tension disc, come up and put it through the spool. I just do it backwards because it's easier. Now we're going to wind it by pushing on the controller, this foot controller. And the idea here is don't go full blast, to go at a moderate speed and a steady speed. So don't go fast, slow. Don't go all pedal to the metal, but you also do not need to go real slow. So you just go at a moderate speed. You hang on to this thread, they say, until it breaks off. If you're using, once it's wound on here, if it doesn't want to break off, if you're using a stronger thread, you can pause and clip the thread off to remove the little tail. Then you can continue winding at a moderate speed, and if your machine is set up properly, there is a stop back here, a little triangle of metal that protrudes in between the bobbin sides, and that is to push the winder away from the hand wheel when the bobbin gets full. And if your machine is adjusted properly, it will do that. Okay? Or you can wind as much or little onto the bobbin. So I'm over half full, and I think you get the idea of how to wind that. So when I'm finished winding it to the point I want, I'm going to back this off a little bit, and I'm going to pull my bobbin off of the spindle, and I'm going to leave about 3 or 4 inches of thread and cut it off from the spool. Tuck my bobbin winder down in its storage area, and so I don't forget, right now I'm going to re-engage the stop motion by holding the hand wheel and turning it clockwise until it binds down on that clamp. So now when I turn my hand wheel, I can see my needle moving up and down a little bit, so I know I'm good. Okay, now let me show you how to thread the bobbin case. This is the bobbin case, bobbin holder. Remember the little hinge tab there? So if I turn it around to face me, just do kind of a 180-degree turn to the left, I see that my 2 bobbin tension screws are visible, and up at the top is a little hole at the end of the bobbin case tension spring. And to thread this properly, I'm going to take my wound bobbin with the thread tail coming off on the left side, and I'm going to enter it into, put it in there all the way. Then I'm going to pull the thread up from the left, and right past the second screw there's a little notch in the case, a little slot, and that's for me to pull the thread into to get it up under the tension spring. And as I keep pulling it to the right, me switch hands here so I can show you. If I keep, I'm pinching the bobbin. If I keep pulling it to the right here, it's going to enter right into that hole, that little rectangular hole at the end of the bobbin spring. So now I've got some, see if I can, if I do this, if I hold it straight up, the bobbin's going to fall out, but I've got some, see, it's in the spring. If I didn't have it in the spring, it would just fall down to the table. Okay? So in this case, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to lift this up again to show you. But the way they say to do it now is to pull out on that little lever and hold the case like that, because that'll keep your bobbin in. And with that thread coming out of the top end, we're going to slide it onto the post in the bobbin case base. Just center it. There's that hole in the bobbin slides onto that case. Then I'm going to let the latch go and make sure it's pushed all the way back. Now if you want to get it started and let the latch go and then push it, you'll hear the clamp in there click, the little spring. Okay? You have to make sure that's all the way on with the thread coming out of the top. That's the correct way to thread the bobbin case and insert it onto the bobbin case base. Now, before we can sew, we have to raise that bobbin thread up through the hole in the needle plate down here. And the way we do that is we use the needle thread and the hook system of the machine to wrap the needle thread around the bobbin thread and pull it up. So to do this, in my left hand, I'm going to hold, see if I can get some better light on there. I'm going to hold that needle thread in my left hand. Can I zoom in a little? Yeah. And then I'm going to turn the hand wheel. I'm going to rotate the hand wheel towards me so the needle will go down and the hook should grab it, wrap it around the bobbin thread, and as the needle comes up, I can pull that thread back up and the bobbin thread is wrapped around it. If it doesn't do it the first time the needle goes down, just gently keep turning the hand wheel towards you. Okay, so now that I've got that bobbin thread pulled up and wrapped around the needle thread, I'm going to pull it up a little bit like so. So now I have pulled up the bobbin thread and I have it up out of the hole in the needle plate. I'm going to take the two threads, tuck them between the toes of the presser foot, and lay them at an angle to the back there. Ta-da! You see that? So we've already inserted the needle, threaded the needle, wound the bobbin, inserted the bobbin into the case, threaded the bobbin case, put it on the machine, and we pulled up the bobbin thread. So now we are ready to sew. Congratulations, you did a great job. You did a very good job. That's right. You get the applause of the video. Yay. Okay, let me get up here and I'll show you some basic steps for sewing. Now that we have the machine set up to sew, I want to talk a little bit about the feed regulator here. This is the feed regulator lever, this chrome lever here, and this is commonly called the stitch length lever, but what it does is control how far the feed dog pulls the fabric on each stroke, each time the needle goes up and down. So that's what controls how long the stitch is, because the needle on a machine just goes up and down. It doesn't go front to back. It doesn't make a stitch by moving front to back. It goes up and down. Even on a zigzag machine, besides going up and down, it can go left and right to zig and zag. But the needle never moves front to back. But the feed dogs either pull the fabric away from you to go under the needle, or it pulls the fabric towards you if you put the machine in reverse. And how far that feed dog pulls the fabric sets the length of the stitch. And you can see the gauge on a machine like this has 6, 8, 12, 20, a straight bar, and then a horizontal bar, and then some vertical bars. On the other side it's 7, 10, 15, and 30. So this machine, the feed regulator, can move the feed dogs at a length that allows anywhere between approximately 6 to 30 stitches per inch. And below the horizontal hash mark here is you are sewing in forward. When you get up and put the bar level with that, it's like you're sewing in neutral. The feed dog is going to go like up and down in its movement, but it's not going to oscillate and pull the fabric. Once you get up above that, you're putting the machine into reverse, and the feed dog is going to be moving front to back to front, and moving the fabric towards you. So in reality, you're sewing the stitch in reverse. Now, for this type of woven medium weight fabric, the instruction manual says a number 14 size needle is good, and a top stitch of about 16, and an inside seam stitch of about 12. So I'm going to move that lever so it's up near the 12 mark. Now you can turn this lever to the right and move the knob and lock the stitch in by pushing it up against the indicator plate. Then it won't go below 12. The idea of doing that is if you have it locked in at a length and you go to reverse, it's going to sew that same length in reverse, and then when you drop it down it will stop right where you had it set. Most people that I know with this machine don't use that, because the lever, if it's adjusted properly, it's not going to move while you're sewing. So I'm going to set it at 12. I'm not going to lock it in. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is the tension unit. Most of these slant needle machines, the average tension is set on the indicator dial between a 4 and a 5. I just rebuilt this tension and cleaned it. I'm going to use 4. Now, if it was a heavy fabric, I might go above that. If it's a lighter, delicate fabric, I might go below that number. On a zigzag machine, sewing zigzag, I would definitely go below. But the idea of the tension is to form the lock stitch between the layers of the fabric. So I'm going to have my tension set at 4. Up here is the presser foot pressure thumb screw. If I turn it counterclockwise, it puts less pressure on the spring pushing down on this. So a delicate fabric, I'm going to want less pressure. A heavier fabric, or a what do I want to call it, like fuzzy fabric, I'm going to, or slippery, I might want more pressure. So I'm just going to use about a medium pressure. Turning this thumb controller to the right puts more pressure. Turning it left puts less pressure. Now, according to the instruction manual, I'm going to lift up the presser foot by raising the lever. I'm going to have my fabrics underneath there. I'm going to put the fabric I want to sew under the foot. I'm going to lower the foot, and they say to lower the needle into the fabric. That's what it says right in the instruction manual. Now, a lot of people don't do that. I don't do it, but the manual says to do that, so we're going to do it. So we're going to turn the hand wheel towards the operator until the point of the needle gets down in the fabric. So we've got our length at 12, our tension at 4, moderate pressure on the presser foot. Seems pretty good. And then we're going to use the foot controller to start sewing. Now I've come to the end of the seam I want to make, so I'm going to put the machine up in reverse, and I'm going to sew, you know, like 2, 3, 4 stitches backward to end that stitch. Okay, I'll do one more by hand here. Then I'm going to release the presser bar lever, which also releases tension on the thread, and I'm going to pull my fabric out, which will drag some thread with it. And there's a thread cutter on the back of the presser bar bushing you can use, or you can nip off your threads. And we'll take a look at the stitching. Looks good on the top. Looks a little bit shaky here on the bottom. I've got some loops. So I don't see any skip stitches up here on the top, but I shouldn't have these little looping at the bottom. So usually loose thread on the bottom has to do with upper tension, needle thread tension. If the loose threads are on the top, that's usually the bobbin tension. The other stitches are locked pretty good, but I don't think there's enough tension up on the top. So I'm going to put my lever back down to 12 to sew normal or forward sewing. And I'm going to come over here again. I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm going to change my tension. I'm going to up that to about 4.5. And one thing that I failed to mention that is very important, and a lot of people don't pay attention to this or realize it, but when you start sewing or when you stop sewing, this thread take-up lever should be at the top. So when you're going to start stitching, this should be up at the top. When you're going to end sewing, you want to try and stop it so this is up at the top. And I'll explain a little bit of that in a moment why. But the other thing is I don't start with the needle down, and I don't start at the edge of the fabric. I come in about a 1/2 inch from the edge, and I go in reverse back to the edge. Just doesn't take many stitches. Then I put the machine feed lever down to sew forward, so it's like I've back tacked my seam. Then at the end I'm going to go up to reverse, and I'm going to back tack to end the seam. And then I'll show you about starting and ending with the lever up. You see the needle is up out of the fabric, okay? But my take-up lever isn't up. My take-up lever is down. If I turn the hand wheel a little bit, you know, I see my needle is up here out of the fabric, right? But if I raise the presser foot and try and pull this, it's dragging on the hook. It's dragging. It doesn't want to release. And that's because of where the hook has grabbed it. So if I turn this forward until this is up at the top, now I should be able to release that thread. It'll slide off of the hook. So that's very confusing to people, especially on this type of a hook and bobbin system, where they will have the needle up out of the fabric, but when they're pulling the fabric it doesn't want to go, so they start yanking it harder and harder, but the needle thread is still wrapped around the hook. That's why Singer says to start your stitch and end your stitch with the take-up lever all the way raised. So when you begin sewing and end sewing, that's what you want to do. If you start that way, you don't need to hold on to the thread tails. I said in another video, I'm not going to get into that because it caused a little uproar of opinion, but I don't hold thread tails because I start with this up. And if you want to start with the needle down in the fabric, go ahead. If you want to hold on to the thread tails when you start, go ahead. If you want to start sewing right at the very edge of the fabric, go ahead. You know, you're the operator. Okay? So let's pull this out and nip the thread, and let's go look at my stitches here. Now, this time the stitching was better. This time I don't see these loops. Sorry, can you see that? I'm not seeing these loops like I had the first time, but I am still seeing a little bit of the blue top thread, little dots of it showing through on the bottom here. And I shouldn't. My top thread is blue, I shouldn't see it on the bottom. My bobbin thread is brown, and I should not see it at the top. And I don't, but I am seeing some little blue dots down here. So going from 4 to 4.5 helped, but my needle tension is still, needle thread tension is still too light. So I'm going to change it to 5. I'm going to try one more time while I'm doing this. Come down here and I'm going to lower this in there. I don't hold my thread tails. This time I'm not going to back tack. I'm just going to sew because I want to test my tension. Whoops, I wasn't still in back tack. Sorry. Okay, so let me get that so that my take-up lever is all the way up. That'll bring my needle out of the fabric, and it will release the needle thread from the hook, and I can pull this easily out, and I can take a look. Okay, that's a much more balanced stitch now. I don't have blue on the bottom, and I'm not seeing brown on the top. So it looks good. Let me sew a finer stitch. That was about 12. Let me just go up to about a 20 per inch, and you'll see that the needle goes up and down more often compared to how fast the fabric moves. And by the way, this reverse feature, you can do it on the fly. You can change it from forward to reverse while you're sewing. I don't recommend you do it at full out speed, but at normal speeds, if you want to back tack for a moment and then go forward again, you can do it. I'll do it here. That should not be any kind of a problem. Okay, this time I got lucky and my lever was all the way up, so my thread's going to release. Remember, when I raise that presser bar, not only does it lift the presser foot up, but it releases tension up here on the tension disc, so I can easily pull my thread through. And there's my little back tack. You can see, and my much finer stitch. My much finer, closer, shorter stitch length by sewing at 20. So that's some very basic sewing. I guess I should mention here that down here, next to, over here to the left of the hook area and bobbin case, this lever does control the feed dog height. And by turning it many times to the left, you can lower the feed dog mechanism so that when you are sewing, the feed dogs will not touch the fabric. Now this would be if you are darning, or some people can actually monogram with a straight stitch machine. And I've seen people zigzag by doing this. So there's no presser foot. See that? I can just pull that out because the presser foot is going to stay below the height of the needle plate. So what I've got to try and do is move this fabric by hand. Now it might be in a hoop, or a good seamstress can manipulate it like this, where normally you don't push or pull the fabric because the feed dog is doing that. When the feed dog's not going to move the fabric, you have to move the fabric. So let's see if I can. Yep. I'm going to lighten the pressure up here on the presser bar. Well, you got to be real careful not to bend the needle. But you can do what I call freehand sewing, in forward or reverse. I'm going to stop there because I got lucky and didn't break anything. Okay, and I even stopped up here. If you're not good at that at first, don't worry, you'll get the hang of it, of stopping with this up here. So I'll go ahead and raise that up and knit my thread, and there's a little bit of my crazy freestyle sewing without the feed dogs moving the fabric. But that, I wanted to show you that you can drop the feed dog. On some modern machines you can't do that. You just have a little plate you cover the feed dogs with, and even some of the vintage machines are that way. The 301 has this big thumb knob here you turn. Counterclockwise all the way lowers the feed dog, clockwise all the way raises it to normal height. So that's it. That's installing and threading the needle, winding the bobbin, installing it into the bobbin case and threading the bobbin case and installing it on the machine, and some very basic, like I said, very basic sewing on the Singer Model 301, 301A. So I hope that gets you started on your machine, and I will put in the description, and I'll try maybe a slide at the end of the video telling you where you can get that free instruction manual if you need one. Thanks so much for watching AndyTube today, and I hope that you will come back and visit me in the future. Take care.